Hi, welcome along to this pre-scene walkthrough video. So we are looking at BackOffice from November 24 to February 25. The first thing I'll say is make sure you've read this before you watch the video. So you need to have a good idea as to what they do. So download it, print it if you want to, so then you can annotate it as I go through it. But make sure you do read it, and it is nearly 30 pages long, so make sure you set aside some time and have a proper read through it. I'm going to pick out the really important bits from the pre-scene in terms of things that you can refer to in your answers, and also things that give us a bit of a clue as to what might be in your exams. I'm going to go through it page by page and pick those things out. I'm also going to provide you with an annotated version of this document. So I'll then add a load of comments, which you can then download as a PDF as well. So this is going to be me talking through it and highlighting and picking out bits, but then there is going to be a document that supplements this video, which has all of my thoughts and annotations on it as well. So you can read those later down the line. So first thing, we are dealing with BackOffice, as you know, who make backpacks. So that's our case. So this is a nice one. We've got CIMA's classic graphics department there doing a wonderful job of their logo by drawing a backpack that I think even I might be able to manage. On that first page, it does have this thing, the context statement, which just tells us a bit about the exams and what's going on in the world. Now, they put this in to begin with during COVID and saying, we assume that COVID doesn't really affect this business. I would just tend to ignore any real world political or economic factors. Otherwise, people become a little bit obsessed with it. So if you start talking about COVID and lockdown and things, it can almost become a major distraction. That's not going to be the main point of this exam. So I would just ignore any of the big real world stuff and just get on with your case. Answer the question they've set. So on to page 2, you've got your contents, and then you've got your role. And it tells us that we are a finance officer working in the finance department at BackOffice. This is in every case study. It tells us we do a bit of management accounting. It says we do some planning and decision making. At times we have to do some financial statement prep and also answer questions regarding financial reporting and other financial matters. That is in every case. It's very standard, and it just sort of says these are the topics that we're going to cover. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. On to page 3 though, this has got some slightly more interesting stuff in. So interesting, in fact, that I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see it all in all its glory. So page 3. Now it tells us that this company designs, manufactures and markets backpacks. And it says they are an alternative to briefcases. It says they're high spec and aimed at the growing market of hybrid workers. Now that's quite an interesting one because hybrid working has become more and more popular in recent years, hasn't it? If you're not aware of what that is, it tells us in the next sentence is people who work from both home and in the office. I very much fall into this category, so this is a great case study for me. Genuinely, I was looking for a new backpack when this case got released, so this is perfect timing for me. I'm learning all about them. But I need to carry, when I'm working in London, I'd take in my laptop, a charger, a bottle of water, probably some paper and pens, my keys, all those sorts of bits. And there is quite a lot I have to carry, and having a nice organized bag is useful. So yeah, this is quite a good one. I'm sure lots of you guys are in a similar position where you sometimes work in the office, sometimes work at home and need to carry all of that stuff. Now it does say that they're a high value brand, and it says that's reflected in the relatively high selling prices compared to other backpack brands. Now that's my first important thing to notice. Any really key bits I'm going to highlight in blue and put a little warning triangle next to. These are really key. These are great things to bear in mind. So they are high-end, high selling prices compared to other backpack brands. Now that could be useful, for example, when we're doing our KPIs in core activity C. So that's what my CAC means. That's core activity C. That's the syllabus area it could come up from. So when we're doing KPIs, we've got to bear in mind we are high-end, we're high quality. It then also tells us that we sell products both through the website and retail stores. We'll see more on that later, but it's a nice mix. Also, they're based in H-Land. Now, I'm sure several of you have been to H-Land. As you know, it's in Western Europe, and they use the H dollar. It's a beautiful country. If you've never been, highly recommend it. Very fashionable, very slick, very nice part of the world. So highly recommend a trip there if you've never been. Okay, so there's our first bit of background around what we do and where we're based. Only founded in 2015. This is one of the more recent cases. So in terms of when they were founded, by Arlo James. It tells us a bit about Arlo. Again, you read all of that. Make sure you can take all that in. It then tells us a bit around what we're trying to achieve. A backpack incorporated style, functionality, and comfort. Now we'll see that more in their ethos later. So we'll see that later on as well. But it's good to know what we're trying to achieve as a business. Again, you can read that. As I just mentioned, it says in here, Hland is renowned for hugely influential fashion industries and also textile manufacturing. And it tells us again a bit of history about Hland. They're not going to ask about that, but you can have a read, get the context. Now this is quite interesting, and I'm going to highlight this in blue because that's how interesting it is. When Arlo founded BackOffice, he decided his company would have an in-house manufacturing facility in Hland. Now, the reason that that is important, almost all other backpack companies either outsource to specialist companies in Asia or base their own production facilities there. So they do it themselves out there as it's much cheaper. So it then says at the bottom there, that decision has proved to be really successful. So actually, a big part of the success is that we are making those in Hland. So wise decision from Arlo, a bit of a unique selling point, a USP, isn't it? Having that sort of homegrown feel to it. So we make them in Hland, and then we do sell quite a lot of them in Hland as well. The vast majority get sold there. So that is a bit different, but again, ties in nicely with that high quality feel as well. Well, it then tells us a bit about the marketing. So they did an external marketing campaign and it did really well. So it says that a global fashion magazine featured all the products, which was great. And then we had this A-list actor. Now it's up to you to decide who this is. So also a goodwill ambassador for humanitarian aid agencies. And she stated that she relied on her supportive spouse, her rider training, and her BackOffice backpack. Now that worked out very well for us, didn't it? That she name dropped us, despite the fact that we're not sure whether we actually paid her to do that or not. But she just said, yeah, I love my BackOffice backpack. So great. Thanks ever so much for that promotion. That worked well. It then says they've had growth every year since launch. So it says about the hybrid workers growing, and it says the growth rate has continued to accelerate. So that is becoming much bigger market now that people are working from home more. So more hybrid workers. And going on to page 4, it says that they're looking to organize their laptops, tablets, work files, chargers, stationery, as I mentioned. It then says we've got some senior managers. You're going to see this abbreviation SMT quite a lot throughout. And it says that their revenue was 16.1 million, gross profit was 7.9, and profit before tax was 2.1. And they sold just over 100,000 backpacks. Now, again, we're going to see those financial statements in more detail later in the pre-scene. So a lot of that information there is background stuff, just telling us a bit about it, which we'll see later on in more detail. So not too worried about some of that for now. Something that is absolutely brilliant on page 4, though, is their ethos. Now, this is gold for when you're relating things back to the case. Having this ethos is amazing because this is ultimately what we're trying to achieve as a business. So some of the keywords I'd pick out here, they are aiming to produce, their mission statement is to produce the most beautiful, the most useful, the most durable, and the most comfortable office backpack. So there are 4 keywords that are in our ethos. That's what we're trying to achieve. Also then, sustainability is crucial. So it says that it's going to be ethically sourced materials. We're using recycled materials where possible. And they're aiming to be carbon neutral by 2030. And we're trying to get closer to that. And it says we use solar panels and the fact that all our vehicles are electric as well. Now, the reason I like this so much is that we can relate back to this in so many situations. Whenever we're making decisions or discussing the approach to the accounting or the budgets or the finance of BackOffice, we need to link back to this mission statement. Does this tie in with our mission statement? So it might be that they say, oh, we're looking to change our supplier to use a slightly cheaper version of the nylon. And then you go, well, actually, okay, it might end up being cheaper, but that doesn't fit in with our ethos. That probably isn't as durable. It's probably not as comfortable, maybe not as beautiful. So does that actually fit in? Well, not really. And also sustainability is important. Is this new supplier as sustainable as our last one? So almost any question you get, you can link back to this. So it's really, really useful. Again, it'll be particularly useful when you're doing something like KPIs and variances, which are in core activity C. Again, it could be relevant for nearly every core activity, but core activity C, the KPIs and variances in particular, have to tie in with this. So really important that you can do that. Right, on to page 5, the global market for backpacks. So it tells us a bit around the market in general. And it tells us here that it was worth 17.2 billion and expected to grow to 31.4 billion by 2030. So that's a huge growth, isn't it? So compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of around 9%. So that just tells us that it's growing at 9% a year they're expecting over the next 7 years. Now that is a lot, so that is huge growth in the market, which is good news for us. Now this was quite interesting, I thought. The largest market is North America, so 5.7 billion. So that's just under a third of the market, followed by Europe and then Asia Pacific. Now, as we'll see shortly, BackOffice don't actually make any sales in North America at the moment. So that has to be an opportunity, doesn't it? If that's the biggest market and we haven't yet cracked it, then surely there's an opportunity for us to go there. And then it tells us that we are in the business backpack, which is within this other section. So if you look at backpack sales as a whole, 31% are from other, and business backpacks are included in there. Then on to page 6, specifically now the European market for business backpacks. So we're going a bit more niche with the market. So we're now honing in on our market. So this is where we are selling things. It's worth 650 million in revenue, and it can be broken down as follows. So we've got that split there. Now, again, BackOffice fits into this medium-sized backpack brand. So it tells us we are classed as one of those. So we're in that blue section, those medium-sized ones. In the pie chart, 30% of the industry is currently there. And it says there are 10 medium-sized backpack brand companies that are based in Europe. And it does tell us that we are at the premium end of the market, as we already know. So we're sort of one of the high-end ones there. But all of this is pointing out it is a really competitive industry and there is a lot of growth. So when there's a lot of growth, it does suggest that there will be more competition, potentially even going forwards. Relatively low barriers to entry to this market, isn't there? You may get companies who currently do other things, maybe like sportswear or outdoor clothing, who then diversify into backpacks. If they're seeing the same numbers that we just saw, I'll be thinking, right, yeah, let's launch a backpack range. If this is going to make us that much money, let's get into it. So yeah, there is a lot of competition, making sure we have to keep that unique selling point and make sure our quality is really, really high. In terms of the large brands, it says in there, so we've got the large global backpack brands. There are currently 3 that operate globally. So it tells us what they do. And it does say they do travel and various other bits as well. A couple of premium, 1 mid-range. And then generic brands. So 20 generic brands that do clothing, potentially even food. And then it does say they're at the economy end. So I'm thinking for brands like that, probably just like your general sports brands like Adidas, Nike, all of those, they make backpacks and they would potentially fit into there. So not necessarily specifically backpacks, but they do other things as well. I can't think of any UK supermarkets that do backpacks, I have to admit. Even Waitrose, like the high-end one, probably wouldn't launch a Waitrose backpack range. But they're part of John Lewis. John Lewis would do, so maybe if you put them in the same group. Okay, on to page 7. Now we get into BackOffice's website. Now, again, you have to forgive the design. It looks like something from 1998, but it's okay. So it tells us a bit around the business and what we do. Again, there are a few things in here that might be useful, but not massively. So have a little read through it. They do both office backpacks and something called the Everyday Carrier Backpack, EDC. You'll see that mentioned a lot, EDC. It says that they are crafted with a lot of attention to detail and comfort and everything else, which we've seen in the ethos already. It then says about the design and build quality and computer-aided design. That's quite interesting, given the fact that we often don't see too much tech in these case studies recently, but they are using CAD to help design those backpacks. So we've got some IT, some technology stuff in here, which could be useful. And then it says there's a lot of testing, and it takes about 10 months before it's passed for production. And then tells us about the design, so the backpack straps and all those sorts of things. And it does say about the fact they're manufactured in Hland. As we know, our suppliers are all experts and local. So there's a bit of supplier relations. Now we're going to see that more later. Core activity F, thinking about supplier relations, which we'll see in a bit as well. On to page 8. So we've got the office backpack range. So what's going on with those? Again, tells you what they allow you to do. Have a read of that. Nothing really in there that jumps out as being particularly examinable or useful for you to mention. A few things at the end which I quite like. So these radio frequency identification blocking pockets, and an anti-theft system. So that RFID blocking pocket, you might have heard of like Faraday cage pouches and things like you get with car keys. So that stops people stealing your contactless card information and things. So that's there. And this anti-theft system, it doesn't really tell us too much about that, but it sounds intriguing. And obviously that link doesn't work. If you do try and click there, it isn't going to work. But I am interested to know how they have an anti-theft system. Then the EDC backpack, so the everyday carrier, is a little bit more practical in an everyday sense, it says. So if you're going on a mini break or you're taking it to work, you can use those as well. So again, you can have a little look through those. Here are the different designs. So we've got the Ufico, however you say it, hard to know. I'm going to go with Ufico, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll go with that. That's the premium one. So that's the premium office. So that's got all of those things in there. Integrated USB ports, everything else. And that's pretty big. You've then got the capsular, which looks very similar, doesn't it? That's mid-size. Office, again, fairly similar, but slightly smaller. You can see on the dimensions as well. And then you've got the Scrivania, which is the compact one. So this is a bit smaller. So for smaller laptops. And again, you can see its features maybe slightly less than the other two. Then on page 10, we've got our EDC, so the everyday carrier backpacks. And it's just 2 sizes for those. So it says about shell opening. So all contents are as visible and accessible as possible. Now, I actually came across a bag the other day that's very similar to this when I was doing my research. So you can see that in the industry research video. You'll be able to see exactly what that means. But it does say they're expandable, which is useful as well. So we've got the large and the small bags, and you can see the difference in dimensions there. It's not huge. And then again, it gives you all those features. It does say that we can have personalization as well. That might be quite an interesting one in the design and the manufacturing process. So you can have up to 3 gold initials. I think that sort of goes against their sustainability claim slightly, doesn't it? Because they're saying either they can be sustainable and reused and things, but if you put your initials on, presumably they're less appealing to pass on to someone else. But anyway, they do that, which is quite a nice touch. Ties in with the premium brand, I guess. Right, we've then got the senior management team. If you've ever seen one of these case studies before, you'll recognize the faces. CIMA have a limited number of images to use, it seems. When you look at recent cases, you'll see a lot of these faces again. We've got Arlo, who's the managing director. Now, you'll probably hear from Arlo quite a lot in your case. So he was previously at a hiking backpack company before he founded BackOffice. We've got Hillary. You are going to get a lot of emails from Hillary. So she is the finance director. She was an FCMA 5 years ago. It says that she works closely with Arlo. She's trying to drive the business forward. Now, that's quite a nice thing to bear in mind. So she's all about moving forward, not just staying as we are, but about innovation and driving forward. In the past, some finance directors we've been told are really cost conscious. She almost seems the opposite. It's more about driving forward. So that's quite a nice thing to bear in mind when we're discussing any decisions we're making. We've then got Jem Rossi, who is the sales and marketing director. So she wants us to be fashionable. That's fine. We've got Jack Lauren, who does production, and he works closely with Ben, it says. Here is Ben, R&D. Now, R&D is really, really important in this case. So lots of new products in the pipeline. We've got 4 new ranges. And it does say that Ben's an expert with IT systems and digital design. So that could be useful later on when we're looking at our digital costing systems, maybe. So might help us a little bit if Ben is very good with these systems. We've got HR, so that's Z. So took on Z when we were looking to be a bit more expansive with the workforce and also taking into account volume in both diversity and making sure that we're hitting those criteria as well. And then we got Char. So Char Greco, so joined BackOffice after 15 years, a global logistics company. Perfect. And it says about the coordination of efforts to deliver customer expectations as you'd expect. So there you go. There's the SMT in our case. It then gives us the management teams. Here we are in the finance team. Now, it doesn't actually tell us how many finance officers we've got. So historically, they have spelled out how many finance officers we got. We don't know, but that's us. We report into Leo Lane. Now, you're probably going to get quite a few emails from Leo as well, finance manager. And there's Hillary. And we do have some finance assistants as well. You've then got the other team structures. Not massively worried about those, but you've got Jem, Fee, and Tony. The production team, so you've got all those heads of various departments. Got research and development. So there's Ben, and then we've got Prim and Cho. HR, there's Zed and Eugene. And we've got distribution, there's Char, Fred, and Cheryl. So we've got all of those things in there. Now, again, I wouldn't worry too much about the different structures. It doesn't really affect us. They're not going to say, who is the current head of website sales distribution? You go, oh, yeah, that's Cheryl. Of course, you get access to all of this in your exam anyway. So if you did want to look anything up, you can. But yeah, not massively concerned. What I would say, though, they are currently operating under a functional structure, aren't they? So they've got all these different departments, got the senior management team, so it is functional as things stand.